Jay here. In tonight's episode in our homebrewing series, we'll be covering
Alright, what's up beer lovers, fellow homebrewers? Been a long time coming. I know I've been promising to do more homebrewing videos. It's just so hard to make these. But today we're going to talk about mashing and mashing out grains. I'm going to be doing a 10-gallon batch today, so if you're starting out with a 5-gallon batch, your amounts are going to be about half of this. The first thing I want to talk about is the grain, and that is the malted barley that we're going to convert the sugars to, or the starches to sugars. And I want to show you what a good grind looks like. If you get in close here, you can see that all the hulls are broken. And if you go through here, occasionally you'll see one that may or may not be broken to the eye. There's one. But if you pick them up, they fall apart instantly. And that's kind of what you're looking for when it comes to your actual grain. Now I have 27.5 pounds of grain in there. It's going to be a big double IPA. And then what we're going to do is I have hot water in my mash tun. It's currently a little bit over temperature right now. It's sitting at about 168 degrees. I want to get it to 165. That way, when I put that grain that's at 72, 73 degrees in there, my temperature will come back down. Now, the rough formula, and there's plenty of mash calculators online, which is what I actually use, but the rough formula is you need 1/3 of a gallon of water per pound of grain for your mashing. And so that's 3 pounds for 1 gallon. If you've got 27 pounds of grain, you need 9 gallons. I have 9.5 because you also have to plan in for your equipment loss and trub loss and things like that. And when it comes to sparging, you need to figure out your total batch and then subtract what your grain absorbs. And grain absorbs 0.13 gallons of water per pound of grain. And we'll talk more about that later when we actually get into sparging it. But our next step is just going to be to dump that grain into that warm water, get it at the right temperature, stir it up, and then we're going to let it sit. You can let it sit anywhere from an hour or 90 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable. An hour is what most people do, though with the modern grains today, I've heard that 20 minutes is more than sufficient. I'm going to let mine go for about an hour, hour and 10 minutes, somewhere in that range, depending on where I'm at, getting my sparge water heated up. So anyway, we'll take a quick temperature measurement. Hopefully we're getting close here. I'm going to go ahead and stir that up first. I don't want to just read the surface of the water. And we should be getting close on our temperature. Okay, I'm still a little bit hot, so we're going to come back in a few seconds here once this gets cooled down and just dump the grain in. You get to see the process, and then we'll wait. Alright, we're back. My mash tun's now at 165 degrees with the water. We're about to put the grain into the water, and it's that simple. We just pour the grain in, stir it up, and that's about it. One thing I did forget to mention, before you start mashing, good idea to get yourself a lovely beer, preferably homemade. But that's definitely a key ingredient to this whole process. So anyway, we're just going to take our grain, and we're just going to dump it in nice and slow. And I know it doesn't look like it's going to fit with all that water in there, but this is a 60-quart mash tun, and I figure I can probably mash around 35 pounds of grain in it. This would be 27.5. So we're just going to slowly dump this in. And there, that's all our grain into the mash tun. And then we're just going to take a spoon or stick or whatever and stir it up. And we're looking for a really thin, kind of porridgey look to it. And you just want to get down in all the nooks and crannies around your false bottom if you have it, or manifold like I have, and just get in all the edges and make sure there's no lumps. And then we're going to check our temperature. If we need to bring it up, we'll have to add some boiling water to it. If we need to bring it down, we'll have to add a little cold water to it or sit here and stir with the lid open for a little while. But we should be pretty close on our temperature. And then once we have our temperature set, it will just be a matter of letting it sit for an hour. And I'm actually a little bit on the high side. I'm reading 157 degrees. I was looking for 152. So I'm just going to continue to stir that up for another minute or two here. And if it doesn't come down in that minute or two, then I'm going to add just a little bit of cold water to it, and I'll subtract that from my sparge water later on. So if I add a pint of water, I'll subtract a pint from my sparge water. And we'll be back. Okay, it took about a minute and a half, 2 minutes just for the temperature to settle out for me stirring it. You know, it took some time for the grains to affect the water temperature and get the lumps out and things like that. But you can see it's been in here for, probably 3 minutes now, 4 minutes tops. And we're already starting to pull out a really nice color out of this beer. It should turn out with an SRM of about 17. So it should be a nice copper color when it's done. And already you can see the color is looking nice. And so I'm just going to close it up. We'll come back in a half an hour and just give it a stir, because the edges will tend to get colder than the center. We want to keep it balanced, and if we have to, depending on your mash tun, at that time we'll check the temperature. If we've drifted too far down from where we want to be, we can add a little bit of boiling water to it to heat it back up. There again, just make sure you subtract it from your sparge water at the end, and we'll be back. Alright, it's been a half an hour. We're going to open up the mash tun, take a look at it, take its temperature, give it a good stir, make sure we still don't have any lumps. As you can see, we're getting to a beautiful, beautiful color. It almost even looks like beer. And that's what we're doing. I mean, we're making beer, so it should. And if you're wondering, I mean, you could do this in the house. It doesn't stink or anything. It smells like cereal, so... It's a nice day today here, though, so I'm going to choose to do it outside. And yeah, our mash tun's lost about 2 degrees of heat in a half an hour, which is par for the course with this mash tun. So I'm going to throw in about 1.5 pints of boiling water, and I'm just going to stir that up to keep my temperature right where I want it, like 151, 152 degrees for this beer. The higher you mash out at, the sweeter your final beer will be. The lower you mash out at, the drier your beer will be. You can effectively mash anywhere from about 158 degrees to down to about 144. And that depends on what enzymes you activate more or less within the grain. And so that's a personal preference. I want this to be a little bit on the drier side, so that's why I'm mashing it to 152. And perfect, right back there. And we'll just close it up. At this point, I'm going to start heating my sparge water. I have 6.5 gallons there, and I'm going to take out the pan of water that I just dumped in my mash tun. And now our water balances out. We still use the same amount of water, so that's it. Alright, here we are. We've done mashing. We're going to start to sparge it out here. And that's basically what we're going to do, is we're going to rinse the sugars from the grains that we've taken all the time to extract. So it's gone for about 1 hour and 5 minutes. I start my sparge water when I stir at the halfway point, and I just kind of depend on when my sparge water reaches 170 degrees is when I start to sparge out. So the first step, and probably the most critical, the only 2 things that are really critical about mashing are getting your temperature right and using the right amount of water. And then this very next step, where we're going to start to drain off our wort, and we got to get the flow set right. But what we're doing is we're starting to set up a filter inside the mash tun, and that's still a little bit fast. You just kind of want it coming out at a nice slow pace. It should take about 45 minutes to an hour to sparge this out. Now there's more than one way to sparge. Today we're going to do a fly sparge. Which is basically, we try to keep 2 inches of water above the grain bed at all times, and until we reached all of our water, and then we just finish letting it drain out. But as you can see how cloudy this is, and there's some chunks of grain and things floating around here, we don't really want that in the final product of our beer. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run it off here, and we could go a little quicker than that, and we're just going to run it off here, and we're going to pour it right back over top. So because this has got lots of good sugars in it, we don't want to lose any of this. So I'm going to cap off the flow. I use one of these to cap the flow off so that once I get my flow set the way I want to with my ball valve, I don't have to readjust it all the time. When I get my flow real happy with where I want to keep it there. So I just use one of those line clamps, and then it goes right back to the flow rate I wanted. Now it's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5, couple of times to get this to start running really clear. And once it does that, we'll go on to filling up the kegel. So, alright, as you can see, there's no more chunks or anything floating around in there. The line looks good and clear. We've started a good filter now. So I'm going to go ahead and cap this off real quick. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, so there's no reason to run that back through. We're going to pull the kegel over, make sure your valve is closed. You don't want to lose any of this. And we're just going to open up that line valve again. I'm going to slide it up so it don't soak in there. And we'll go ahead and pour this in as well, because there's nothing wrong with it. And now the grain bed is actually draining. At this point, we're going to start to sparge it. And you can make a really fancy sparge arm. And like I said, there's a few other types of sparging. I don't normally fly sparge unless I'm doing a really big beer like this where I've almost filled my mash tun with grain. Normally I do a modified batch sparge. Now nobody's allowed to laugh at me, but this is my sparge arm. It's about as cheap as you can make. It's a recycled cottage cheese container and a pan. So we're going to take our 170-degree water out of the pot, and we're going to pour it in here just to sprinkle it over. And the reason you want to do that is because if you were to just pour this in there, there's a chance you could cavitate the mash tun, and you'd start draining from one place and one place only. And that would you would fail to get all the sugar out of this. So you want to make sure you get everything out of this you can, and the way that you prevent the cavitation is by sprinkling the water over top. So we're going to get this to where the grain bed's about 2 inches below the top of the water, and then we're going to close the lid and let it drain for a few minutes, and then we're going to continue to do this. The whole process should take about 45 minutes, and you know, make sure you have a beer handy for this because you're going to be standing here for a while. And that's it. That's how you mash. By the time we're done, I'll have 11.5 gallons in here if I plan my water correctly. And from there on, it's just like making beer from an extract kit, except for you've done your own extract and it's already got the right amount of water in it. You just boil it, add your hops, put it in your fermenter, and add your yeast and let it do what it does to become beer. And if you missed the video on it, I did do a video where I did do an extract batch. You know, like I said, after this point, the method's the same. So, you know, I appreciate you watching this video. If you like this, if this helped you out, you know, pass it along, share it with somebody. I appreciate you watching. Have a good night. Cheers.